Have you ever wondered why, even when she says nothing, you feel a silent discomfort, as if you already know the answer you fear to hear? It's not the lack of signs, it's the excess of them. The glance that avoids you, the body that withdraws, the polite word without warmth. Male pain doesn't come from the absence of clues, but from the refusal to face what they reveal. In depth psychology, Jung said that the shadow is everything we don't want to recognize in ourselves. In relationships, this shadow appears when you prefer to guess, create theories, invent excuses instead of accepting what her gaze has already delivered. It's easier to get lost in the mental game of doubt than to face the clear silence of indifference. This is the labyrinth where so many men get trapped, not because they don't see the signs, but because they can't bear the truth behind them. Emotional neuroscience explains, the brain seeks coherence even if it's illusory. It prefers a tiny possibility over the certainty of rejection. But clarity is the dividing line between the man who lives in the echo of hope and the one who takes his place with emotional authority. When you learn to read the signs, not to deceive yourself, but to accept what is, the inner game changes. You stop being a hostage to expectation and become the owner of your perception. And it's in this space of lucidity that power begins. Not in controlling what she feels, but in recognizing what is in front of you without running, inventing, or denying. Truth, even painful, frees more than the illusion that prolongs your prison bus, the chosen blindness you know when she looks, but her gaze doesn't hold. It's quick, almost imperceptible, as if fleeing from what cannot be said. In that instant, her body has already spoken. But you prefer to believe you saw nothing. Anesthesia. The fear of confirming the obvious weighs more than the courage to face the truth. The male mind craves direct answers, but often hides in hypotheses and justifications, a subconscious escape from the pain clarity brings. By clinging to guesswork, you avoid the immediate wound but condemn yourself to prolonged pain. Jung would call it resistance to the shadow, the fear of facing the possibility of not being enough. Neuroscience shows that the brain seeks safety, even if false. That's why so many remain stuck in ties that died before they were even born. It's not lack of perception, it's refusal. Not inability, it's emotional cowardice. And blindness doesn't protect, it only prolongs agony. Each time you close your eyes to the obvious, you reinforce the identity of someone who must deceive himself to keep going. Deep down, you already knew. In the first cold gesture, in the lack of enthusiasm, in the dim word. Instead of accepting, you distracted yourself with hypotheses because doubt still gives hope. Certainty kills illusion. That's why so many remain imprisoned, not by lack of signs, but by refusing to accept them. It's in this escape that weakness is born. He who doesn't dare to see cannot act, and he who doesn't act becomes hostage to her silence. While you guess, she has already decided. While you fantasize, she has already shown. The more you avoid the evidence, the further you move away from yourself. In the end, the chosen blindness is not about her. It's about you and your relationship with truth. It's about the courage to see what hurts and still remain whole. Only when you open your eyes, even to rejection, do you begin to recover. Doubt doesn't protect, it corrodes. Clarity, as harsh as it is always the first step to emotional freedom. The mirror of indifference. There is silent pain in being present and still feeling invisible. You speak, you give, you try. But indifference is crueler than open rejection because it doesn't respond. It doesn't scream, it doesn't confront, it ignores. And in that absence, you feel smaller, faded, irrelevant. The human brain is wired to seek belonging. From childhood, we look into faces for warmth and approval. When her gaze turns away, when her body closes, when her attention is anywhere but you, the impact isn't just emotional, it's neurological. The limbic system reads it as a threat, triggering inadequacy and insecurity. That's why indifference cuts so deep. It denies you as a partner and corrodes your sense of worth. Female language rarely limits itself to words. While you wait for Yes or no, she has already answered in micro-expressions. The mouth's corner that drops, the gaze that won't hold, the body pulling away. Desire, when it exists, also reveals itself. Posture opening, breathing quickening, eye contact that lingers. But when you cling only to words, you ignore the silent communication that says more than speeches. This partial blindness creates a cycle. You insist on vague promises, neutral answers, inconsistent messages, while reality has already been declared in her gestures. It's like trying to pick fruit from a dead tree. You persist because you don't want to believe. Psychology calls it cognitive dissonance. We create narratives to keep desire alive even against the facts. We'd rather believe there's a chance than admit we invested in emptiness. Yet the greatest pain is giving yourself to someone who doesn't even recognize your presence. But here's the paradox. Her indifference can be a mirror. It reflects not only what she feels, but how you see yourself. You allow yourself to be treated as invisible because, at some level, you've accepted that identity. You settled for living on the margins of her attention instead of questioning why you're there. The deeper pain is not in her diverted gaze, but in what you failed to demand of yourself. The man who realizes this transforms the scenario, not by forcing attention, but by stopping the begging for emotional crumbs. He reads not only her signals, but the inner reflection they awaken. The emptiness of indifference becomes a call to self-completion, and in that moment, power shifts. The unconscious test few things unsettle more than obstacles without apparent reason. One day conversation flows, the next silence delays unanswered messages. Male logic seeks consistency. Female logic moves in emotional currents. It's not planned contradiction. It's unconscious movement, often imperceptible to her. Tests appear as small trials, delays, subtle provocations, comments that sting your pride. Their purpose is to measure your solidity. If she pulls away, she watches if you collapse in anxiety or stay centered. If she provokes, she wants to see if you lose control or respond calmly. Silent questions. Are you guided by impulse or by your axis? Just desire seeking gratification or steady presence that withstands fluctuation? In evolutionary psychology, this is ancestral mechanism, not malice but instinct, assessing emotional stability, not just material. The unconscious searches for resilience, strength, coherence, even when the conscious is unaware. Male pain arises when you mistake the fool test for a verdict. Instead of recognizing the pattern, you feel hurt, react with anger or anxiety, try to force explanations. You confuse test with contempt, absence with disinterest. And by reacting impulsively, you fall into the trap she unconsciously set. Emotional neuroscience shows that, when tested, the male brain activates circuits of threat and competition. The heart races, the mind seeks quick answers, the body readies defenses. Without mastering this state, you react impulsively, demands, despair, insistence. But if you stay centered, something shifts. She perceives that you breathe through the storm. Each test is a portal. The man who understands this doesn't feel diminished, but strengthened. He sees the provocation as her insecurity, not as an accusation. He responds with firmness, without arrogance, sending the silent message, I'm not guided by impulse, but by my axis. This stance dismantles the test and creates a new perception. The magnetism of someone not ruled by fear. The power lies not in avoiding tests, but in going through them. Solidity isn't built on easy days, but on the ones that challenge you. What was once frustration turns into sovereignty. To me, the void of guessing, living in doubt is like walking through a desert without horizon. You interpret gestures, analyze words, but clarity never comes. The simple turns into an endless maze of assumptions. Does she feel something? Is it just politeness? Am I fooling myself? Meanwhile, life passes unanswered. Guessing is an emotional addiction. Filling silence with hypotheses still offers a thread of hope. Illusory. Each guess traps you deeper in impotence. Without the courage to seek clarity, you become hostage to the unknown. Psychologically, this keeps you in reaction. She pulls away, you chase. She is silent, you interpret. She shows minimal kindness. You confuse it with desire. Your emotional life revolves around her signals instead of your presence. Identity shaped by what she doesn't say, not by who you are. This prison of speculation corrodes confidence. Each failed guess chips away at your control. The mind invents alternative versions that feed waiting. While you imagine, time wastes, life slips, and you stand before a door that never opens. A man who lives by guessing never leads. He's always waiting for the next clue, adjusting course to her gestures, unconsciously asking for permission to act. He abandons his role of guiding himself. Whoever lives to interpret signals forgets to emit his own. Neuroscience shows prolonged uncertainty activates the same circuits as physical pain. The endless suspense drains vital energy. You think you lack strength to break the cycle, when in fact breaking it would restore your energy. Breaking free demands courage. Courage to ask when necessary, to accept what's already evident. To close chapters instead of prolonging illusions. It's not about winning or losing a woman, it's about winning yourself. The man who stops guessing doesn't get lost in the void. He turns it into clarity. And clarity is what separates the man imprisoned by hope from the one who lives truth. The turning of power transformation happens when you read unconscious signals without fear. You realize each gesture, silence, and averted gaze already contains the answer. At that moment, doubt loses power and you move with emotional authority. This power doesn't come from controlling what she feels, but from being rooted in yourself. When you stand without anxiety, without needing to prove, without bending to tests, she senses the magnetism, not of rehearsed lines, but of the firmness of a man who doesn't get lost in illusions. Stable presence dissolves uncertainty. Psychology shows female desire is activated by consistency. It's not the man who reacts to every provocation who attracts, but the one who remains steady. The unconscious recognizes stability as strength. The energy shifts. You're no longer just another competitor for attention, but someone who already occupies his own center. In practice, her gaze not only meets yours, it stays. Her voice opens, her body responds instinctively, because something in her recognizes a man who doesn't need approval to exist. Magnetism comes from the absence of desperation. The emotional game flips. Before you begged for clarity, now you read whispers without clinging to them. If she pulls away, you don't collapse. If she tests, you don't spiral into anxiety. If she shows interest, you welcome it, but don't become hostage. The silent power of clarity creates a presence impossible to ignore. The secret isn't to force her heart, but to decode what was never said. He who knows doesn't chase, he who knows remains. And this permanence reveals you're not seeking approval. You carry the authority of being desired. In the end, the turning doesn't happen when you control her, but when you no longer need to lose yourself in her to feel whole. That's sovereignty. Your clarity stronger than any illusion. From then on, desire stops being pursuit and becomes consequence. You've walked a path that's not about her, but about yourself. Each rejection, silence, and test was a mirror. While you tried to decode her signals, what you really needed was to decode your own. The emptiness you felt wasn't born of her gestures, but of your refusal to assume your clarity. The man who lives in guessing exhausts himself in endless doubts. But the one who chooses lucidity stops begging for emotional crumbs. He discovers that power was never in the gaze she diverted, but in the courage to keep his own firm. Transformation isn't making her choose you, but refusing to choose yourself as a second option. There's a force born when you accept what is without fleeing or denying. That force doesn't beg, doesn't humiliate, it remains. In that permanence, your energy shifts, your presence rises, your silent authority imposes itself. The game flips not because you conquered her, but because you stopped being conquerable by emptiness. What was once pain becomes clarity. What was doubt becomes decision. What was waiting becomes movement. You stop being the man who begs for signs and become the one who carries the internal map of desire. And in that state, it's not she who defines the path. It's you. Like the video, subscribe to the channel and leave your comment, because every truth revealed here is a psychological weapon no man can afford to ignore.